Hello, my name is Jim van Geel and I work as curator public program at IHLIA LGBTI Heritage. Thank you for watching today's lockdown lecture. The invitation for speakers in this series is rather simple. Choose one item out of the IHLIA collection and put this in context. My lockdown lecture, however, is not about an actual piece from our collection, but rather a piece which I believe should be in our collection. My lockdown lecture is about Imagevirus, a project by Canadian artist group General Idea. This group existed from 1968 until 1994 and consisted of A. Bromson, Felix Bartz, and Jorge Zonto. The project Imagevirus ran from 1987 until 1994. The project Imagevirus consists of many different versions of the same image, a logo spelling AIDS in red, green, and blue. The specific iteration of Imagevirus that I believe should be in the IHLIA collection is shown here in the work Imagevirus Amsterdam from 1991. It is a photograph of a project General Idea did in 1990 in Amsterdam to coincide with an exhibition of their work in the now closed Museum Verder in Amsterdam. In the project, they bought advertising space on trams running through the city and plastered these trams with many separate large stickers of roughly 60 by 60 centimeters. They also sold the stickers as an addition. This specific sticker is what I wish we had here today to show you as a piece of the IHLIA collection. I've chosen this subject for my lecture as I believe it is an incredibly urgent work. In my view, it shows the political potential of apolitical art. Especially in our current climate, where we are again dealing with a pandemic, a study of Imagevirus shows us how artists can unleash the potential of a virus as artistic practice. This statement, however, is quite convoluted. It is nearly impossible to argue that any art is apolitical, let alone an art piece about AIDS, or rather by using AIDS as a medium or method, made by a group of queer artists at the height or perhaps depth of the AIDS crisis. Yet I want to argue that it can be quite productive and potent to view this as apolitical art for the time being. It is, of course, and always a very political work, but going by trying to analyze it as apolitical, we can begin to understand the artistic potential of using a virus as a method rather than a theme, something that could be useful for artists and actually all people living through the current corona crisis. I will return to this specific piece later, but first I want to give a short introduction on General Idea and their artistic practice. General Idea started out as an artist collective in 1968. They were active in the Toronto art scene and community in which they operated by having their own little gallery, a storefront adjacent to their living room where they did exhibitions, hosted events, and sold things. If I were to characterize their artistic practice, I would compare it to drag. They took history and conventions, culture, and spun it around. They took the contemporary and turned it into performance. They poked fun at the world by creating their own world. A great example of this is File. File is a magazine which General Idea self-published from 1972 until 1989, which made them quite well known and respected, not just in the Canadian art scene, but well beyond it. As seen here in this image, File is Life magazine in drag. It borrowed or appropriated the 4 letters and the logo of Life. It is an early example of a queer zine, which has a long and rich history well documented within the IHLIA archive. Drag is also a literal theme running through their work. For example, they organized the Miss General Idea pageant. In this event or performance, other artists competed to be crowned Miss General Idea. This happening was filmed as a television pilot. Television is another important aspect of their work. They have made important video works which are presented as television shows. General Idea had a specific connection to the Netherlands. Their first big solo show was at the Stedelijk Museum, and one of the first big acquisitions of their work by a big institution was done by the Van Abbe Museum. At one point, they even made a work for Dutch National Public Television at the time when Dutch National Television would still allocate time for art programming in their broadcast, which was actually scrapped because the network found it to be confusing and they thought it mimicked actual TV a little too well and were scared that viewers wouldn't understand it was art. For General Idea, the medium was the message. It is an overused quote from Marshall McLuhan, but it applies also well to General Idea. The work of General Idea might be confused as pop art. though it drags along the traditions of pop art, General Idea had a cynic approach to their contemporary culture, reproducing it and making it into performance. There where pop art often doesn't go much further than reproducing out of an almost giddy infatuation. Much can be said about General Idea's approach to art making, but because of time constraints in this lecture, I will move back to Imagevirus for now. The painting AIDS by General Idea came into the world in 1987. It was a direct reference to the well-known work Love by pop artist Robert Indiana. Love was originally designed as a Christmas card by Indiana for MoMA and later became a series of screen prints and various gigantic, well-known sculptures in public space. General Idea dressed AIDS up in drag of love, a crude or cynic joke. AIDS was first shown in relation to an AIDS benefit organized by OMFAR in 1987 in New York, the city where the members of General Idea had moved the year before. Initially, the painting was not badly received, but is quickly changed. Here we see an installment of the project Imagevirus. The paintings moved out onto the street and became DIY plastered posters. The documentation of this poster project, seen here as a photograph, has become a work in and of itself as well. We see it here with the added line Imagevirus in all white capital letters. This, of course, is a direct reference to Absolute Vodka. Continuing the analysis of General Ideas using drag, we see Imagevirus in absolute drag. The artist collective used familiar popular culture and subverted it. The project, just as a virus would, kept reproducing itself in a cold and viral way. Here we see 4 other versions added, 4 new mutations of the virus, if you will. This brings me to a quote by Greg Bordowitz that I would like to share. Bordowitz wrote a fantastic book just about this work alone. The primary idea guiding their decisions from Imagevirus was that of the virus. AIDS is a mindless repetition, an automatic self-reproduction, emotionless, without conscience or consciousness, inhuman. A force of nature. Viral diseases are testaments to a vast cosmological indifference. They prove that nature doesn't hold individual life too dear. Beings are born and they die. This is the crux of the work. The work is not just about the virus, or perhaps not even at all. The work is a virus in and of itself. It infected the art world and public space with its seemingly endless reproduction. General Idea used the ways in which a virus works as their medium. The medium is the message. 2 major ways by working as a virus that we see today as well, to use a political term weaponized by General Idea, are confusion and repetition. I could show endless iterations of the project's Imagevirus. They've done so many, but here we see another one in an exhibition format with endlessly reproduced wallpaper added. To further the analysis of the work as apolitical, I would like to share another quote by Greg Bordowitz. Imagevirus is difficult to situate. It was not expressive or personal. To the contrary, it was impersonal. It was neither lyrical nor didactic. It was almost unsympathetic. It was most unsympathetic. It was a cold piece of anti-humanism, vacant in its refusal to mean anything, unclear who it was meant to address. At first glance, the AIDS logo was a crude joke, seemingly the work of a homophobe or cynic. It didn't appear to be the work of a collective, the work of gay men, people with HIV, or poets. General Idea turned the acronym AIDS, the name of a fatal disease causing an uncontrollable epidemic, into a puzzle. The group steadfastly refused clarity or intention, message, audience, and emotion, and during a time of war, Imagevirus occupied huge sections of valuable cultural real estate with nonsense. The work was nonsense, as Bordowitz states. It didn't mean much. It could have said Addis instead of AIDS if read differently. A. Abramson would later characterize General Idea at this time as working as an advertising agency. Yet what was it advertising for? It was advertising for nothing. The project kept mutating and spreading just like a virus would. The posters did not just appear in public space in a DIY way, but took over valuable advertising space, such as shown here in the Metro of New York. The Metro is not just a random choice. If one would compare the city to a body, these lines are the veins of said body, argued General Idea. Their project and AIDS infected the bloodstream of the city, just like a virus would. This is when it really started to irk activist artists who were occupied with AIDS activism, such as Grand Fury. Grand Fury was a radical group of artists who had come out of ACT UP, the AIDS coalition to unleash power. They were also active in New York, but focused on calls to actions with famous slogans and imagery such as "Silence is death." The Imagevirus project did not share a call to action. It did not include safe-sex warnings. It did nothing other than reproduce the logo all over the world in public space and exhibition spaces. Grand Fury responded to this by making their own version, shown here. They replaced love and AIDS with riot, a radical call to action, typical for Grand Fury, who took a more political commentary stance in their practice and a more didactic tone as well. And this brings us back to Amsterdam. Having established that the work's apolitical and that it is a virus in and of itself, we continue. In Amsterdam, we see and can begin to unpack the potent political potential for work such as this. Here we see a news article from 1990 from Dutch newspaper Het Parool, and it reads, AIDS-tram lokt werkweigering en acties vandalen uit, which translates into AIDS-tram provokes refusal to work and actions by vandals. It was widely reported in almost all national newspapers how Amsterdam tram drivers refused to drive trams which had been plastered with the posters, or stickers, I should say. They did not want to be affiliated with AIDS. The trams were vandalized, many posters were torn off, and it was heavily suggested that this was done by tram drivers themselves in the tram depot. In a similar way that the medium is the message, one could say that context is message as well. The vinyl stickers, which have been used on the trams, were also sold separately as an edition by Museum Verder. This is the print that I believe should be in the IHLIA collection. The same print is also in the collection of Stedelijk Museum, who recently acquired the complete archive of General Idea. However, this print in the Stedelijk collection is an art piece. It is a numbered and signed edition. I wish that IHLIA had a print that was unnumbered and unsigned, one that was intended to be put onto the trams, or perhaps even was on one of the trams, and preferably even was vandalized and torn off, because the context of IHLIA is that of a queer cultural historical artifact, not as an art piece. General Idea hated the myth of the singular genius artist. They presented themselves as General Idea rather than using their individual names exactly for this reason. They used brand tactics. Because of this, the argument could be made that Imagevirus should not just live on in museum collections, but also in archives. General Idea purposefully infected public space and went beyond the confines of the art world. So why should this work only continue to live on in the collections of the art world? You see, the IHLIA collection is very much infected by AIDS. It is perhaps one of the most represented topics within our archive. A simple search on our database using AIDS as a research term gives over 18,000 hits. Yet our archive remains to be infected by Imagevirus. Thus, half-jokingly, I would like to mention that if you have one of these prints at home, we very much welcome donations. As an archive with small acquisition budget, we are dependent on donations of materials. Furthermore, as an organization with grassroots history, with a clear community and constituency, we need these donations. Even if we had a massive acquisition budget, we would be dependent on donations from our community, as many of the items we want to safeguard for future generations never enter the market. They are either donated to institutions, but more often are discarded. Thus, this is a general call to action. We warmly welcome donations of any kind of object or document or archive that tells or could tell stories of queer history. We warmly welcome donations of historical material, but also of contemporary materials, which could be used for future historiography. If you want to donate or get in touch with me about this lecture, please use one of the emails addresses on the screen. In closing, I want to acknowledge Greg Bordowitz again, whose brilliant analysis of Imagevirus provided much of the material and arguments in this lecture. As an encore, I would like to leave you with another quote from this, which beautifully describes the critical potential of queerness. Imagevirus, General Idea, had been working with the idea that images are viruses for a long time before the AIDS crisis. But during the crisis, the exigencies of AIDS activism created a demand for agitprop and direct action. The virus was no longer a metaphor, but a deadly reality that posed a tremendous challenge to the group. Remaining true to their own ongoing project, the Canadian conceptualists were forced by circumstances to adopt their established methods in a new situation. They had to inhabit and subvert the viral forms of capitalist media in the present. To this end, they explored the critical potential of homosexuality to reveal the hypocrisy of dominant heterosexual norms. Simply put, they refigured the styles and tactics of a homosexual avant-garde, using the threat of viral infection as their model for identity politics. Thank you.